Alright, Shalom, y'all. Hold on. Alright, Shalom, y'all. I want to give all praise to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Salutations to the Akim out there spreading this truth like wildfire. Shalom to the Israelite foreigners who look like the other nations, but their spirit beareth witness that they're the children of Yahweh by Yahweh Shai. And Shalom to the real sisters out there. Alright, this is gonna be a live on Israelite foreigners and original looking Jakes and how basically Esau, like the history of Esau pitting us against each other, and how that hatred needs to stop, and how and it's gonna stop. The elect among the Israelite foreigners and the elect among the original looking Jakes, they're not gonna hate each other. The house of David, the breaches are closing up, so they're not gonna hate each other. But basically, I wanted to go into it cause I was watching the live stream GMS Houston last night, and they was going into the Gentiles, and the Gentiles that they was talking about was the Israelite foreigners. And one of the scriptures that they brought up was Acts 6:1. Got it pulled up right here. And in those days, when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews, because their widows were neglected in the daily ministration. And that's that shows you that the curses was already in going on even back then. And these these are the Gentiles / Grecians that it was talking about there. John 7 verse 35. Then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go, that we should not find him? Will he go to the disperse among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? Oh, Shalom, Ak. That's the So even back then, the Jews, the Israelites that knew that they were Israelites and kept the customs and everything, they knew that there was Israelites dispersed among the Gentiles, and they was called Gentiles. But this is one way our people got separated, basically. And it goes back to the days of Maccabees. Goes back to those days. Right here. I'm just gonna go back to where it first started. These were the Jakes that they decided to make a covenant with the heathen. Verse 7. But after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus called Epiphanes took the kingdom, Jason, the brother of Onias, labored underhand to be high priest, promising unto the king by intercession 303 score talents of silver, and of another revenue 80 talents. Besides this, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have license to set him up a place for exercise and for the training up of youth in the fashions of the heathen, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochians. They was calling themselves Antiochians. Verse 10, which when the king had granted and had gotten into his hand, the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to Greekish fashion, and the royal privileges granted of special favor to the Jews by the means of John, the father of Eponymus, who went ambassador to Rome for amity and aid. He took away and putting down the governments which were according to the law, he brought up new customs against the law. For he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought the chief young men under his subjection, and made them wear a hat. Now such was the height of Greek fashions and increased heathenish manners, through the exceeding profaneness of Jason, that ungodly wretch, no high priest, that the priests had no courage to serve any more at the altar, but despising the temple and neglecting the sacrifices, hastened to be partakers of the lawful allowance in the place of exercise after the game of discus called them forth, not setting by the honors of their fathers, but liking the glory of the Grecians best of all. So that's how those Israelite foreigners came to be called Grecians. When Esau took over, and decided to do this. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people. So he basically forced these heathen ways on us. Okay. Let me see which one. Okay, it was verse 41. Right here. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. And certain of the people were so forward herein that they went into the king, which gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. Now when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion of 2 realms. Wherefore he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with chariots and elephants and horsemen, and a great navy, and made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt. But Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death. Thus they got the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof. And after that Antiochus has smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year, went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar and the candlestick of light and all the vessels thereof, and the table of the show bread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the censers of gold, and the veil, and the crown, and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. He took also the silver and the gold and the precious vessels. Also he took the hidden treasures which he found. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land and made a great massacre, and spoken very proudly. Therefore there was a great mourning in Israel in every place where they went, so that the priests and elders mourned, the virgins and young men were made feeble, and the beauty of women was changed. Every bridegroom took up lamentation, and she that sat in the marriage chamber was in heaviness. And the land was also moved for the inhabitants thereof, and all the house of David was covered with confusion. After 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, which came unto Jerusalem with a great multitude, and spake peaceable words unto him, but they all was deceit. And that's these devils for you. By peace you shall destroy many. For when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city and smote it very sore and destroyed much people of Israel. So he got them to think that he was their friend and shit, and then hit him with the uppercut basically. And when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire and pulled down the houses and walls thereof on every side. But the women and children took they captive and possessed the cattle. Basically, he first these wicked niggas, they were talking about becoming like the heathen and forsaking the law, because Esau was in power and they wanted to fit in with Esau. And then, so first it was basically optional. It was being encouraged by that leader, and that was one of, the leaders of our people that cause us to err. Now, that's an example of that. And he was rewarded by Esau. Esau put him in charge, basically. And then it was made mandatory. So first it was introduced to the people, it was an option, and then it was made mandatory. But this is how, right here. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yet many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. For the king has sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Jerusalem that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, that they should profane the Sabbath to festival days, So what do you think happened when they did that? Most of the Israelites, they didn't stand up. They didn't stand up for the law and for their heritage. They went along with it. And that is how they became Israelite foreigners. That's how they became Israelite foreigners. And became the Gentiles and the Grecians, the Hellenistic Jews that are spoken about here and in John 7 verse 35. And also, since they were among the heathen, what Jake likes to do? Jake likes to deal with these heathen women. So this is how Jeremiah 12 verse 9 happened. Mine heritage is unto me as a speckled bird. The birds round about are against her. Come ye, assemble, all the beasts of the field come to devour. That's how that happened. And that's why it says in Tobit 13 verse 3, confess him before the Gentiles, ye children of Israel, for he hath scattered us among them. And I wanted to go into how Israelite foreigners nowadays. This is specifically meant to the Israelite foreigners that look like Esau, and majority of them think that they're so-called white, that they're the same people as Esau. And it goes back to this, even now this one is better. It goes back to this. The inventing black and white basically is when that black and white witchcraft was first used on our people. In Virginia in the 1600s, Anthony Johnson secured his freedom from indentured servitude, acquired land, and became a respected member of his community. Oh, Shalom, Lawam, Yahweh, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai Barakatah, Ak. The Spirit was on me to do a live on this, and became a respected member of his community. Elizabeth Key successfully appealed to the colony's legal system to set her free after she had been wrongfully enslaved. By the 1700s, the laws and customs of Virginia had begun to distinguish black people from white people, making it impossible for most Virginians of African, really Israelite descent to do what Johnson and Key had done. This is why they did it, because the Israelites, the original looking Jakes, the so-called Negroes, they were teaming up with these so-called poor whites, which a lot of them, they was indentured servants, which that's just, when you look into it, it was just another way, like another way that they was tricked into the indentured servitude. They was tricked into it. Like, they said that they were gonna be apprentices or some shit like that. So it was really another way to enslave the Israelites, except it's gonna be called something else, so that the Israelite foreigners would not identify with the original looking Jakes and vice versa. So why did Virginia lawmakers make these changes? Many historians point to an event known as Bacon's Rebellion in 1676 as a turning point. Nathaniel Bacon was a wealthy white, so-called white, really. You could tell this guy was an Edomite. He wasn't going through the curses or nothing. He was a wealthy, so-called white property owner and relative of Virginia's governor, William Berkeley. But Bacon and Berkeley did not like each other, and they disagreed over issues pertaining to how the colony should be governed, including the colony's policy toward Native Americans, another group of Israelites, tribe of Gad. Bacon wanted the colony to retaliate for raids by Gadites on frontier settlements and to remove all Gadites from the colony, so landowners like himself could expand their property. So, and that was the reason why Bacon's rebellion didn't work out. Because first of all, these Jakes were fighting on behalf of Edomites. And they were fighting against their brothers, the Gadites. That's why it failed. Berkeley feared that doing so would unite all the nearby tribes in a costly and destructive war against the colony. So he was more like, this devil was more like, nah, let's, like less of a aggressive type approach, pretty much. Just like you have today, you have the Democrats, Republicans, good cop versus bad cop. Basically, the Republicans are like, basically they're all gung ho about being proud devils and shit, while the Democrats are more like, nah, let's be politically correct towards Jake and all that. Let's not say anything to offend them. But Democrats, at the same time, they push wickedness on our people. You know, at the same time, they push that sodomite shit and that abortion shit on our people at the same time. So they're deceivers. Versus the red Republicans are the proud red devils. But basically, it's just two different approaches to how Esau deals with our people. Shit, my fucking head. Alright, so eventually what happened was he organized his own militia consisting of so-called white and so-called black indentured servants. So there was indentured servants that were so-called black too. And so-called black people that were just called slaves, pretty much, who joined in exchange for freedom and attacked nearby tribes. Like, there was the indentured servitude, and then there was that hardcore chattel slavery, basically. And you had original looking Jakes that were in both types of captivities. Yeah, so it was a power struggle with like between this Bacon devil and Berkeley, the governor, that devil, and the rest of the colonies, the Virginia House of Burgesses, and the rest of the colonies' elites on the other. Months of conflict followed, including armed skirmishes between militias. In September 1676, Bacon's militia captured Jamestown and burned it to the ground. Although Bacon died of fever a month later and the rebellion fell apart, Virginia's wealthy planters were shaken by the fact that a rebel militia that united so-called white and so-called black servants and slaves had destroyed the colonial capital. That's the point right there. The events in Jamestown were alarming to the planter elite, who were deeply fearful of quote unquote multiracial. Really, your skin color don't determine your race, so it wasn't multiracial. They were Jakes. One looked like how we originally looked like, and the other looked like Esau. Indentured servants and slaves. Word of Bacon's rebellion spread far and wide, with several more uprisings of a similar type followed. So they were like, we gotta stop this shit, because otherwise, Jake is gonna unite, basically. And then what happened is they decided to give the Edomite looking Jakes more rights, like a little more rights than the the Israelites of that than the Israelites that they're originally looking Jakes. I'm just gonna say that they decided to give them more rights, basically give them the overseer or manager position. And so they wouldn't relate to each other. They wouldn't team up against Esau. And so what happened is many of the so-called European descended, so-called white looking Jakes began to identify themselves, if not directly with the rich so-called white, Esau, certainly with being so-called white. And here you get the emergence of this idea of a so-called white race as a way to distinguish themselves from those dark-skinned people who they associate with perpetual slavery. Hold on, Akim. Alright, I'm back. Alright, so there you go. There you go. That's how that's how they that's how they divided the Israelite foreigners against the original looking Jakes in the first place. And also I wanted to go into something else because I saw this article right here. I was looking up how the Klan got their hood and shit because, like, I heard that, well, I read somewhere before that they got their hood from, basically from the Jakes that were in Spain, so I wanted to look up more info on it, basically. But basically, I found this when I looked at that article right here. This is heavy right here. Lynchings were not spontaneous outbursts of mob violence, but the predictable result of institutional support and the outright participation of political elites. The lynchers of Leo Frank in Marietta, Georgia in 1915 included a former governor. Not sure if y'all could see this. Alright, now y'all should be able to. Judge, mayor, and state legislator, sheriff, county prosecutor, lawyer, and banker, business owner, U.S. senator's son, and the founders of the Marietta Country Club. Frank's a typical case. He was so-called white and Jewish. He was an Amalek. Attracted media attention. That was why that thousands of Jake victims never received. Yet it exposed the ways that elites and authorities exonerated themselves by blaming mob violence on so-called crackers, which is basically the crackers it comes from. That's basically what the poor so-called white looking Jakes was called. First it was meant for that. Now Esau gets called that. Now I think now Esau gets called that too. But originally it was meant as a byword for Israelites that look like Edomites. And it goes on basically show that it was the politicians, the Edomite politicians that were actually behind these lynchings, and it wasn't the so-called crackers, basically. So I wanted to go into something else right here, and this is true. It's by that devil LBJ. If you can, I think this one is better. It's better if you could. Well, I meant to say it's easier for y'all to see. I'll tell you what's at the bottom of it. If you can convince the lowest so-called white man, those poor whites that come from the indentured servants, that he's better in the best color, man, which that's the original looking Jakes. That's one of them. They call our people colored. He wouldn't notice. He won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll even empty his pockets for you. And that devil LBJ setting is true though. Sometimes these devils will say shit like that that's true. They give you truth and lies. And I said earlier how they're basically set up as overseers. Like they were set up, they went from cracking the fucking whip over pack animals to cracking the whip to drive and punish slaves. So they were put like, over us as managers and shit. And one thing you notice with when Jake gets put over another Jake in the managing position, like they're assholes to their own people. Like they like to flex that power over them. Like when a Jake or Eve even gets put over another Jake, that happens. And that's just another way that these devils divide and conquer our people, like by putting Israelite foreigners and Northern Kingdom Jakes over Southern Kingdom Jakes, and light-skinned as well as light-skinned Southern Kingdom Jakes. They like to put them over darker-skinned Judites. They like to do that too. All this shit is goes back to Willie Lynch letter. This is the speech by that devil, Willie Lynch. And he was invited to Virginia, 1712. Which this is just the divide and conquer shit, like being called something else. That's all it is. Because it wasn't enough to divide us against, like, divide us by color of skin against Israelite foreigners being pitted against the natural looking, original looking Jakes and vice versa. That wasn't enough. They had to do this too. This was a foolproof method for controlling our people. It will control the slaves for at least 300 years. At least. What they did right here, this shit going into colorism right here, and other divisions. Don't forget, you must pitch the old so-called black male versus the young so-called black male, the old heads versus the youngins, and the young, and vice versa. Basically, you must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves, and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. That colorism right there. And that was even expanded to be used against the Northern Kingdom. And you can see it over there too. You have those Indios versus mestizos. You have them versus Judah versus Los Negros versus Northern Kingdom. They got them hating on each other the same way. It's just they do the same shit but call it something else. And then of course the female versus the male versus the female. You must also have so-called white overseers, so-called white servants, and overseers who distrust all so-called blacks. But it's necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. So basically, that was Esau telling these other Edomites how to keep Jake in check, basically. Keeping them distrustful, perpetually distrustful against each other. And dependent on our enemies for all things. That's the curses right there too. That's the curses right here too. I gotta get this. For one of all things. And Israelites, no matter how they look, like they're going through that. But I'm gonna pull that up. Looking for that verse. Anyone knows what verse I'm talking about, they can post it up. Just gonna look it up. for all things. I think that's how it go. Like, con right here. Salakia, I think I was on the. Yeah, I think I was on the wrong one. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee, in hunger and thirst, and in nakedness, Salakia, and in nakedness, and in want of all things, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. So that's what these devils did. They made us dependent on them for everything, basically. And also, they must love, respect, and trust only us. That goes into this right here. Goes into this. I think it's right here. It's in the same chapter. I think. Con right here. That part of the Willie Lynch letter goes into this. When a rich Ecclesiasticus chapter 13 verse 23. When a rich man speaks, every man hold his tongue, and look what he said. They extol it to the clouds. But if a poor man speaks, they say, what fellow is this? And if he stumble, they will help to overthrow him. That's what that part right here, respect and trust only us, basically. That is how that fulfills that pretty much. But basically, yeah, all kinds of fucked up shit these devils was doing. But that's basically how yeah, that shows you that these devils are just shows you that it's all like basically divide and conquer. It's just divide and conquer brought back again, basically. Because it was the same people, the Romans, that used divide and conquer, the same people using Willie Lynch shit against us. It's the same devils. But y'all, yeah, like, I just wanted to go in on that. I just wanted to bring that out. And you so-called black original, you original looking Jakes and Israelite foreigners that look like the other nation. Like, this was directed at the ones that look like Edomites, but you Israelite foreigners, period, gotta stop looking at your brother in the same way that the heathens do. And 1/3 of y'all are gonna get over that and not be affected by the black and white witchcraft that was put on our people by these devils. Alright, so I hope this live was edifying. Shalom, y'all. Stay strong, men and women of valor.